And like just the idea and concept of going to therapy, it's almost like admitting that you're crazy or something's wrong with you.
Today's generation doesn't know how to write. That's what a high school English teacher told me several months ago. Why did he say that? Because he was seeing it among his students. Students who didn't understand sentence structure and grammar, much less the art of storytelling. Here were several dozen teenagers, and less than half of them had ever even read a book purely for pleasure. This is the world of technology, the world of AI. Arguably the most urgent and prevalent topic of the modern day, we are talking about continuously evolving technology that has grown to affect nearly every aspect of our lives. A tool that, when used correctly, opens up immense possibilities for critical thinking, and when used incorrectly, has degenerative effects on a person's ability to communicate, express, and learn effectively. Danbae Kim is just about as close as one can get to being a full-on AI expert. As a fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, she works with both students and educators to guide them in the thoughtful, responsible, and beneficial use of artificially intelligent technology. And that's not all. Through her platform PromptED, she's teaching others exactly how to use AI in a way that encourages critical thinking. At the core of it all, what makes Danbae special is how connected she is to being human. AI has its place as a tool and as a supplement, but few things are more fulfilling than a good, honest conversation. My name is Yuvan Rasaya, and every 2 weeks, I sit down with people from all walks of life who have something meaningful to offer. Lessons, stories, and honest reflections on personal growth. These conversations aren't about having all the answers. They're about learning from people who've lived through moments of loss, change, and renewal. Welcome to Lived Words.
So you've had the opportunity to live in several different countries. Can you talk a little bit about how different cultures you've experienced and sort of how that's shaped the way that you talk about or don't talk about the concept of mental health?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel so blessed to have been exposed to the spectrum of Western and Eastern cultures. So let's say on the very extreme end of individualism, you have North America, and the more east you go, you have more collective orientation, right? And so I was born in Korea, I left at a very young age, and I always knew that mental health was not something you talk about openly in Korea. And like just the idea and concept of going to therapy, it's almost like admitting that you're crazy or something's wrong with you, right? So, and then I grew up in the spiritual community in India where people didn't actually talk about mental health as much as just more about overall well-being and spiritual well-being, right? And then I went to high school in Berlin where suddenly people were talking about mental health, but again, also a little bit more in a taboo way, right? It was not as open. And then I came to the US later in my adulthood, and then that was around the time where it's like everyone's talking about it. Even just the term and concept of anxiety is like a term that was not in my vocab in my high school. So all of that to say my experience, and I think this still is the case, Korea, Northeast Asia, or Asia in general, I think there's definitely a huge stigma still around mental health. It's changing with the current generations. But my experience is I do think that there's a cultural component to talking about mental health. And I think one of my mottos in life is to fight the demon, you have to be able to name the demon. You know, you have to be able to name and actually crystallize whatever you're experiencing. So if it's always this amorphous, ambiguous thing, you're not even able to describe what you're experiencing, right?
Absolutely.
So anyway, so that's just my very personal subjective experience, but I do really worry that in the Northeast Asian context where there's so much pressure to perform, a lot of societal expectations, and on top of that, you can't talk about the mental, emotional challenges of dealing with that pressure. I think that's a big issue.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting, that idea of labeling things, categorizing things. I think it's a very human thing that we do. That we put people and things in groups so we can understand them. And in some ways it can be negative, but I think it's also necessary for us to understand and for us to be able to talk about things, because if we don't have a context in which to kind of have our ideas, then we'll never really get anywhere, because we're going to spend the whole time telling each other what we're thinking.
100%. And I wonder, in some ways, I always think about Gen Z as the first generation that has such rich language to describe their mental and emotional experiences. But with that came also the flip side of over-identifying with certain terms, right? Even like, let's say, anxiety, trauma, these terms that, again, I didn't grow up with, right? So then when does it become like you over-identify with this? Even something like ADHD, for example, right? It's like, it's much more like loosely thrown around now, where it's like, oh, I have ADHD, or I have OCD, or I have all these traumas. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing to have the language, but when do you then like actually tip towards oh my God, I'm just over-identifying, and you're kind of like just loosely labeling all these things, right? And I think so Gen Z is really, not speaking on behalf of a generation I'm not a part of, but I think younger generations are really trying to strike that balance of having that rich language, yet not like, over-identifying and over-generalizing.
Right, I absolutely agree. And recently on a previous episode, I talked to Dr. Swayam Bagaria, and he and I talked about this, and he had this very interesting point where he made where people, when we get these labels, we get these diagnoses, right? I have anxiety, I have depression, it becomes that person's identity. And then in believing so strongly that you have that thing, it prevents you from escaping it or from healing from it. And it's this funny thing where the label helps us identify the problem, and it's great to be able to identify the problem, but often we have an identification of the problem, and then we're like, okay, that's just who I am now, right? And, and that's not necessarily, the whole point was to not do that.
100%.
The whole point is to label it so you can not, internalize it, and you can escape out of it.
I also think there's like an additional component where having those labels, you become a part of a community in a way, right? It's like, oh, I also have anxiety, and you're able to feel like this is a collective experience / struggle that you navigate. And so that's also another reason why I think people gravitate to certain labels, because you don't feel like alone in the experience, which is such a human desire to feel understood, like you're collectively going through something. So I don't think it's a big surprise that people are gravitating towards these concepts and labels. But at the same time, when does it become too much? And I don't have the right answer for that. So I very much err on the side, okay, I'm not going to label myself too much, right? But at the same time, I don't think I have the rich language that a lot of young people have to describe their experiences, right? So I'm also trying to figure it out too, like just in terms of where I fall on, like how I strike that balance.
Absolutely. There is a concept that I think of comfort that comes from knowing that you are part of something. And people talk about like shared trauma, and it's really what it is, right? Where it's like we all kind of have this, this sort of pain or suffering that we deal with, and so we can all connect on it, and then speak on it. And it's one of those interesting things where like I care so much about mental well-being. I wouldn't be able to do this podcast as effectively if I didn't have my own experience with it, and if I didn't have in some ways the labels in which to talk about it, because it's what gives me the foundation to be able to speak about this, right? But at the same time, it's not something that I want to have to deal with.
Oh,
right?
I feel you.
And so, but it helps me in a sense, because it helps me with what I want to do with connecting with people. And there's a weird dichotomy there where it's like it's helping me connect with people, but it's also harming me because it's negative. Great.
No, Yvonne, I think you put it so eloquently. And if you think about it, if like negative and traumatic experiences can be bonding, I don't think as much holds true for, let's say, positive experiences. We're not like, oh my God, I had this most positive experience. Did you too? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But I think it's because negative experiences or difficult struggles is so growth inducing that you almost like have like a new layer of skin, new layer of perspective, new superpower, so to speak, when you come out of that. And that is like a bonding experience, right? Especially if you can navigate it. It can be bonding to just be like, oh, we're going through a very similar struggle. But then when you come out of that, to be like, oh, whoa, like, can you relate to the fact that you're like this new person?
Right.
And so I think, like you said, my experience with every struggle I've gone through, challenges, mental, emotional, spiritual, have been that, okay, it's tough when you're going through it, but there's something so rewarding about the fact that, okay, when you get through this, however long it'll take, because you don't have control. You can't timestamp it. That's the thing. I wish I could like time box it, like kind of the way you do and when you're designing products and startups. You're like, you have design sprints, and by the end of the month, you're going to be like, okay, this product or feature will be shipped. But like, that's not how it works with us,
Absolutely.
And so my point is, I wonder if we can shift the culture a little bit to have more positive experiences also be a bit bonding. Because I think right now, the current culture, at least in the US, is very much like, okay, let's bond over certain types of difficult experiences.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. I think
Right.
it's really important, again, to name the demon or things that you're struggling with. But how do we create spaces and opportunities to kind of nerd out and bond over more positive experiences?
Yeah.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, whether
Yeah.
there is enough like platform or space to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there's an assumption that I've made that I think as human beings, sometimes we're inherently negative in our thinking because we react to negative things. That's why the media is so negative. It's why social media is so negative. It's why we because it's how we connect emotionally with things.
Yeah.
It's just often it's stronger for negative things. Nobody reads the news if it was like, look, everybody had a good day today. Like no one would read it. It's
Yeah.
not exciting, and it's which is such a sad thing to say, but it's a real kind of human trait, and I think it's. But also at the same time, there are positive experiences that we can bond on, and I think that I don't know. I mean, trying to think of an example. I took flying lessons
Oh,
2 years ago, and I met someone who's also done flying lessons, and it's something that we connected on as I've actually flown a plane before. Have you?
Yeah.
You know, it's a positive thing in that it's an experience that we had, and we could talk about it, and it wasn't a negative, connecting experience. But it's also it's a harder thing to just randomly talk about because it's more of a material thing.
I totally agree. I mean, it's interesting because I think so intentionally about the role of AI in education and
Right.
society. And I would say 85% of my conversations with people in this space, whether it be like they're doing the research to work on the models or studying the effects on humans and their cognition, most of it is negative in the sense, or very critical and skeptical, right? A mixture of all. But I went to a retreat recently where one of my colleagues and a peer of mine said, oh my God, do you guys ever think that large language models, so like ChatGPT, Claude, it's this like mystical, beautiful instrument. You put some input and kind of like the way you would instrument, something comes out. And there's something so beautiful about that. And it really stuck with me because it's been a minute since someone in the space that I work in said something so positive or beautiful about this thing, because a lot of it is like so critical and oh, it's destroying the environment and it has ethical implications in terms of
It's gonna take over the world.
Exactly. So I'm so used to that, just trying to immerse in that. And also I don't want to be blindly optimistic, right?
Yes.
So I always entertain or try to inform myself. But I think that really stuck out to me where I'm like, whoa, it's the first, I will never forget that moment because I remember, wow, she called it beautiful. This thing, this LLM. And I was like, wow, it's so important to have a mix of opinions and perspectives and so that just came to mind right away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's an appreciation of beauty in things that we don't appreciate often, right?
Yeah.
That I think that allows us to connect sometimes. And we live in such a rushed world where everyone's trying to do things and be successful and have a career and make money and buy a house and obviously all important things, but we go so fast that it's I've never thought about ChatGPT wow, that's such a cool thing that I could do this. Isn't that crazy? Because it is such a cool thing that I could do this. And we didn't have it until a year ago, 2 years ago, and yet it happened, and now everyone's like, "Oh, this thing sucks." we didn't even see what it does, and think about wow, that, what a brilliant thing that we've created.
Yeah.
Going from something like Google to this thing that is able to compile that information from Google and give you something that you can understand and read and is legible to the average person.
No, you're so right. And I think what I'm really taking from what you said is just the importance of slowness and slow gazing to be able to appreciate beauty and things. Because beauty, to look at something or someone as beautiful takes time. You have to actually sit down, not be in sprint mode or I have to go to the next destination mode to really just look at something for what it is, right?
Yes.
And we live in a very fast-paced society, largely driven by our relationship with technology. Technology is not designed to be oh, let's go slow,
Yeah.
It's very much, okay, on to the next. Convenience, efficiency. And so that sometimes takes away our capacity to appreciate beauty in the small things, right? And that's why I try to have days where I have analog days where I don't use phones or
That's awesome.
And it just allows me to really catch details in my interactions about the environment.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. Even movies, like I love going to this cinema,
Yes.
right? I watch the same film twice or thrice if I really like it. And I love catching new details. And if I was
Me too.
streaming, you know, and if I was
Absolutely.
streaming on Netflix, right? I'm like, oh, I got a notification. I'm going to pause. I got to
Yeah.
go. You see?
Yeah.
So it like kind of takes away from that like focus and attention and the slowness to be able to appreciate something.
Yeah.
And so, the slowness. We need to introduce more slowness, I think, in our lives.
You know what my favorite thing is? Airplane mode.
Oh,
I put my phone, I'm so serious. I put my phone on airplane mode when I watch a movie.
yeah. Oh,
Because
amazing.
I don't want to look at it.
Yeah.
And the only thing that rings is if I have a calendar thing, and that's important because I need to know if I have something to do.
Yeah, fair.
Right? And that doesn't need any internet. I turn my phone off essentially.
Wow.
I turn on airplane mode, so there's no I don't get any connection, and I put it to the side and I watch a movie. I do that when I do a lot of things. I don't ever really carry my phone around
Yeah.
on. It's always on airplane mode when it's in my pocket. So the only time I check it is if I take it out of my pocket.
Yeah.
So it's more of an active thing versus like a passive, oh, it just rings. That's been huge for me. I think, like, you ever just step outside and it's sunny out and you look at the grass and it's just green?
No, it's the best.
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Of
Like,
course.
nobody
yeah.
does that.
Nobody does that.
It's so crazy because, so I was at Phillips Exeter for three years, right? And we have a beautiful campus, brick
I'm sure.
buildings and trees and grass, and every day
Yeah.
the bell rings and everybody's walking really fast
Yeah.
up and down campus, completely lost in their own worlds, and headphones and biking and
Yeah.
going to class and homework, and it's like, look at we have an amazing campus.
Yeah.
It's so incredible to just look at, and even the other day I was looking at, like, it was cloudy out and I was like, look at the clouds.
Yeah.
They're
No,
so cool. You know what I mean?
I couldn't agree more. I remember I read an article in the Harvard Gazette a couple weeks ago that shows like the research behind forest bathing, which is this idea you go into nature and you just like hug a tree, like quite literally,
Yeah.
you know, and the positives of that.
Yeah.
And because I grew up, again, in a very kind of a rural part of India, I grew up in this community, and I just really was walking around barefoot, and I grew up in kind of like a jungle context.
Sure.
I miss that so much. And I think Cambridge and Boston, it's not maybe as nature-driven, but it's not like an industrial city either, right? And I constantly think about, oh, wow, Dambi, when was the last time your feet touched grass? Like not, like really, without socks or anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because we always wear shoes, right? So you don't
Yeah.
even have like that actual physical sensation
Yeah.
of like touching like soil, dirt, or grass or whatever. And that's wild to me.
Yeah.
Like that for hundreds and thousands of years. So I don't know how to like quantify it, but for a long
Sure.
time, we did have that experience, right?
Right, absolutely.
And now we're like, there's more and more removal or like layers between you and like sensory experiences or to nature. And that now it's like we have to be so intentional and conscious about, oh, we need to immerse more in nature versus that being the default,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's how we were initially designed, is to
Yeah.
be in nature.
Yes.
Right. So it's not, it's so odd to me that we now we build nature spaces.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, look how many green spaces are in my city. It's like, that's crazy.
Like Central Park,
I
right?
know, right? You should live in the green spaces, not in the
I
not in the
know.
buildings.
Exactly.
That's how we're designed, and it's such an odd thing, and there's so much, I think, when we talk about all the negatives that happen and the negatives that we perceive as human beings, I wonder how much of that is because we're stuck in this this curated world of man-made things
Yeah.
and technology, and which is an amazing thing, but it's like there is so much. I think human connection happens outside of that world.
Yeah.
Connection between people. I've had the opportunity. I've gone on several expeditions. When I was in middle school, I did a couple in New Hampshire. Sophomore year of high school, I went to Utah for a week. I went backpacking in Utah in the desert. Those are the things that really connect people, because it's like there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
You have to talk to someone.
Exactly.
You have to be with people.
Yeah.
You're sleeping in the same tent. You're walking around trying to find water in the desert.
Yeah.
We walked 1.5 miles to try to find water because there was no
Whoa.
water. It was like, and there was no water. There was no water. We had to go find a puddle and fill up our water things with the water in the. Like, I'm so serious.
Yeah.
Right. And then clean it with iodine, whatever.
Yeah.
Stuff that they give you. like that's real things that I did, and
Yeah.
and that's really what bonds people, because it's like it's not trauma, right?
Yeah.
I think that the idea that's like, oh, it's shared trauma, you're trauma bonding, I think that's false.
Yeah.
Because it's actually not traumatic.
Yeah.
I don't have a negative perception of what happened.
Yeah.
I have a positive perception. I grew from that, but I
Yeah.
didn't grow in a way that was necessarily painful.
Yeah, I love that. And what I'm taking from what you just shared is just the importance of being
Right.
together, like the act of being, not doing, not like striving.
Yeah.
And I consider myself a pretty ambitious person. I have like several things I want to do, and I always feel like I don't have the time to do all of it.
Yep.
And so what I really look for in my dynamics is not like having the chasing the highs of like, oh my God, let's go to a life-changing concert, or, oh, let's go see,
Yeah.
It's more so like, oh my God, can we share and really rejoice in the beauty of the mundane and trivial?
Yes.
Right? Because it's the richness of just being together that I think is so beautiful.
Yes.
And that's not to say you shouldn't like plan things and do some fun activities together. But if the default is, okay, we're being and we appreciate that,
Yeah.
and the slowness and the mundane, I think that's a really good place to be in, you know? And I don't think we've gotten good at being,
Yeah.
I think especially like in the kind of the ecosystem I'm a part of right now, it's not to say that everything's transactional, but I feel like there has to be a purpose for every meeting, right? Okay, we need to talk about this project, or we need to, let me tell you about what
Yes.
do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And that, I'm not saying that's all transactional. There's something beautiful about that, but it's not like, oh, let's just be together. Like, when was the last time you told your friend, like, hey, I guess we can say let's hang out, but
Yeah.
still, like, I don't think
But it's like,
as,
what are we doing?
exactly, what are we
Right.
doing? Exactly.
Yes.
And it's like, can't we just go for a walk in the park, and just even walking in silence, I think can be so nice.
Yes, absolutely. I childhood friend of mine came over to my house 2 days ago now, and he came, said hi to my parents because he's known them his whole life. Said hi to my sister. I was eating dinner, so I finished my dinner. He sat and hung out with me, and we went down to my basement. And we sat there and we talked for about 2.5 hours, and he left
Wow.
at like 1 a.m.
Wow.
and drove home. Like, we didn't do anything else. We just had a conversation.
Beautiful.
And it's amazing, right? And it was not hard. It wasn't difficult. It didn't feel like, it was dragging on. I was like, okay, what else can we do? We had nothing to do.
Yeah.
We had things to do. We just didn't do them.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to.
Yeah, and I think so cool. I mean, some of like the best conversations I've had in my life are in cars.
Yes.
So somebody dropped me off,
Yes.
right? And you're supposed to leave, but for whatever reason, the conversation goes on, right? And you're in this very confined space. I think of cars as moving homes, right?
Yeah.
It's like you get really attached to your car.
Yeah.
And then you're in this intimate space in a very unplanned way. The conversation continues, and then like lo and behold, it's like 3 a.m. because the
Yeah.
conversation, and it's so nice. And
Like a room you can't leave.
Exactly.
It's literally like you're stuck.
Exactly. And it's so intimate, it's so unplanned. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh God, we need to make the most out of this time. It's just so, it's like the act of being,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I heard a quote once about road trips, and it was something like you should take a road trip with someone that you're in a relationship with.
Yeah.
Because that's when you really figure out what kind of person they are in a pressured environment.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're stuck with the same person for an extended period of time, that's when you really figure out who people are.
Totally.
Because there's gonna be frustration. That's how it happens. And how do you deal with that? And that's
Yeah.
where you really learn people. And I think that speaks to exactly what you're saying, where it's like you put people in an environment where they have to talk, and there isn't a whole lot to do.
Yeah.
But even in cars, people will be on their phone and not pay attention and disassociate from the conversation. And it's harder, but it's possible. And it's unfortunate the way that we, I don't know. I think we have these environments that exist, and we actively choose not to use them.
Yeah.
In the ways that we could. And I think that speaks maybe to something that maybe an addiction, but also maybe the way that we think about conversation as a society
Yeah.
culturally.
And that's so true. I mean, a book that I've read recently, it's called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And this book is about, okay, we spend time with people, whether it be in Zoom meetings or with just hanging out with friends or for weddings or all sorts of human gatherings. But so much of it is just like the act of let's get people together, and that's
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
But then there's also like a series of decisions and like design decisions, from how you design the space to the prompts that guide conversations, that completely enhances how people interact, right?
Yes.
So it's a series of actually design decisions,
Yes.
in terms of how people gather. And after reading that book, I realized, whoa, like, because I'm so used to having people in my life so scattered across the world. So
Yeah.
even the fact that, like, let's say earlier this year, I went to India. It's one of my close friends' weddings, and all of my childhood friends were together. And that was for me. I'm like, oh my God, it's good. I mean, we are all together in one place. But then I didn't actually think, whoa, how do we design these gatherings and introduce conversation prompts and like the space we gather? Because for me, such a big accomplishment to even have people in the same space, right?
Yeah.
But after reading that book, Yvonne, I'd highly recommend you to read it. You really
Absolutely.
think about, wow, it's not like you need to plan an entire wedding, like put on an event planner hat and do crazy details. But a couple of details can completely change
Yeah.
the 2 hours you spend with your friend,
Yeah.
you know? So like, yes, conserve the being part and like don't try to make it like transactional and so goal oriented, but also introduce a couple of design decisions to just enhance the experience.
Sure.
For example, right? So at our Center for Digital Thriving, Beck has this, like my colleague has this protocol called the Clint's Circle. So it's like named after one of our students, and it's a really, really simple discussion protocol. I'm not going to get into it, but basically you just have to listen, and you can't really comment on what, let's say it's like we go in a circle and you
Yeah.
share something, and then as much as I want to react to it, I just have to answer one of the questions, and then and it feels a little bit divided. You're like, oh, we're not doing a ping pong. But
Yes.
because you listen so deeply, like I've seen people like cry time and time again during Clint Circle because you're sharing, and you know that everyone's really listening because like the protocol invites that. And then it's such a cathartic experience for people, right? So even that discussion protocol, right? I try to do it with my friends and with my family now.
Yeah.
It's not like some like sophisticated design, but I'm like, whoa, even just introducing it completely changes the hour I spent with my friends.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
just introducing that, having that
interesting.
know-how. Yeah.
So interesting. So interesting. There is so I talked to Dr. David Baum, who has kind of spent his entire life researching, understanding, teaching conversation,
Oh, wow.
and considered himself a conversation architect, which I think is a really cool name that most people don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But it's a cool name, and he's brilliant. And he talked about going for walks and going for walks in nature with people, and that being a way to connect with others, because it's a situation where it's just you and that person. You're somewhat isolated from the world, right? Because there's nothing kind of around you other than trees and birds and maybe the occasional mouse, and it's this experience that holds a lot of value. And I think one of the interesting things that we sort of, a point that I sort of stumbled upon in our conversation was, it's not about the walk. You know what I mean? And some people go for walks because they love to walk. I don't go for walks with my friends because I love to go for walks with my friends necessarily, right? It's not the walking part. It's the friends part. It's the conversations part.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who I went on a walk with, we talked about this concept of going for walks. And she was like, yeah, she knows these people who play poker as a friend group. And she was always kind of confused as to why they play so much poker together. And they always talk about playing poker together. And they play poker every night. And I was like, maybe they don't play poker because they play poker. It might not be about the poker. It might just be about hanging out, right, with each other as friends and spending time together. And that's where the joy comes from. It has nothing to do with playing poker. They might not even like playing poker that much. It could just be a thing to do, right? That they all know how to do it.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting because I love going to live music. I like to go to experiences naked. And what I mean by that is you can watch a trailer to go watch a movie, or you can, listen to an
gotcha.
album before. But I like to go when it's kind of like I'm uninformed in a way, and I'm like, oh, you get what you get type of thing.
Sure.
It's like a mystery box, right?
Yes.
And
Sound like my dad. My dad says that too. He hates movie trailers.
oh, really? Yeah. I just think it ruins it sometimes. You're like, no. And sometimes trailers are just like riddled with like spoilers.
Yes.
But my point with this being is I haven't, most recently I went to a show by myself, which I don't do that often because I love to go with friends who either like the music or we just want to hang out. And even when I go to a venue, to a show where I'm completely by myself I don't know anyone in the room, just being in that experience, I often close my eyes when I'm in like a live music venue, and I can feel the presence of the people. So even if it's not people I know, just being in this like collective shared experience, is so beautiful, you
Yeah.
know, even if it's not like my friend or like someone that's like super near and dear to me.
Right.
Just like if you actually immerse in that experience, being in an experience together with someone, even if it's a stranger, a room of strangers,
Yeah.
I think it's really beautiful. But I wonder if our educational system, like actually like teaches or fosters that in people, you know?
Right.
Because I don't think it should just be exclusive to people you know, like your soul tribe, right? The
Yes.
ability to be together with
Yes.
complete strangers that you may not see again, but
Yep.
really just be in that present moment together, I think is one of the greatest skills to have in life, to
Yeah.
actually enjoy,
Yeah.
right? Because as much as I would love to spend every day with my loved ones because of kind of my diverse upbringing, I don't have an opportunity to do that. So
Yeah.
that's put me in a position to be like, okay, it's not feasible for me at this point in my life to spend time with all my closest friends and my family. So with that, like, how can I still enjoy every day without just being like, I have to be with loved ones every day?
Hmm.
You know, either solo dolo or like even with a group of strangers. And I
Yeah.
think that skill is so not talked about or underrated.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you're almost connecting on the art, right, or on the experience. Like if it's a concert, on the
Yeah.
music. If it's a movie, then on the screen, on the visual aspect.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of inherent connection between you and all the people in this in the concert hall or in the theater.
Yeah.
Because you're all here for the same thing, right? And so if nothing else, you know that these people like this random artist's music, right? And that could be, that's just how you connect, and that's what you connect on. And it doesn't need to be talked about, doesn't need to be said. I think there's a sort of energy in appreciating something
Yeah.
together, right? Where we don't have to
Totally.
really even speak about it. It
Yeah.
just kind of happens.
And it's so interesting, right? Because I could have gone into that concert and the artist was really funny because she kept on being like, okay, talk to the friend that you came with and like hug them. And I was alone. So I was just there like, oh God, I don't have nobody. I could have easily like been in that experience and felt super awkward, very lonely. But I wasn't. Actually seeing a group of like people, they had their best friends or their lover and they're like, you know, hugging and like appreciate, that just made me so happy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you can, and I think so, even if you're not constantly with loved ones, family, and friends, but you can really just be in human company, even with strangers, and appreciate that, you don't feel as lonely, right?
Yes.
So I think this idea, I've completely challenged myself to think about, like, what is loneliness? You know, it's that inability to just sit with yourself. It's that inability to actually appreciate people or things that are strange to you, or strangers or foreign to you. So I think that's a skill that I've really developed in like in this period of my life. Because
Right.
before it was very contingent on like, no, I need to make a series of decisions to make sure I'm close to family and friends. And I still think that is an important dimension of my life. But for whatever reason, here in Cambridge, in this chapter, I just haven't had as much exposure socially, right, as I'm used to.
Yeah.
So I think this is like a new layer of like understanding, awareness I have now, just to really enjoy being by myself, one, but
Yes.
also being with others that like are strangers,
Yes.
and just relish in that too. Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned something, and I want to ask you about it. What are your thoughts on PDA, public display of affection? I think, and I ask this question because, in my mind, there's kind of two schools of thought, at least from the internet has taught me, and there's one group of people who are like, that's gross and nasty, and please keep that away and locked in your room, and there's one group of people that is like, that's amazing and beautiful, and we love that you feel comfortable with this person, and you know are able to display how you feel, and it makes me feel happy to see that you're happy, right? And I think there's a balance, obviously, and I'm not saying, please don't go doing things that are illegal or inappropriate outside in public, but there's also an aspect, I think, to visually showing connection to someone that makes you feel good, it makes them feel good, and it makes people who see that feel good, right? You ever see like an old couple holding hands walking down the street? Like, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks maybe to some interesting things about our society that people look at that and say that's weird and nasty and please don't do that.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's why are you so against this? It's not harming you, and it's not really, there's not a whole lot of negatives. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, so PDA, great question.
Am I
First
wrong?
of all,
I don't know.
I think it's a cultural thing. So
Yes.
I mean, really, like PDA in the US versus Germany versus Korea versus India, very different,
Yes.
right? So first of all, there's like a certain cultural dimension to it, but I also think there is a PDA can be different in energy. So for example, I spent my teen years in Berlin. Berlin is known to be very sex positive to the point that if you like, grew up, spend your teen years and you're so like pro nudity and pro like just whatever sexual preferences you have. And like, it's not as like taboo to talk about that.
Right.
So I grew up in that culture, especially as I was coming of age. And so then in America, it's so interesting. It's like you're very progressive, but there's also so many aspects of culture that's so prudish, right? Like super anti-nudity, for example.
Yes.
But what's for me is like the thing about the appropriateness of PDA is if it's not like so sexually charged, for example, and it's just like really like affectionate, which are very different energies, I think, right?
I absolutely agree.
I just want to make a distinction. It's very different. Let's say at this concert, one couple is like just really holding hands or just like kissing people on the cheek or just on the peck, that's one. And another thing is like deep makeout mode and it's making people feel uncomfortable because you're like, let's do that in an intimate space, right? So I think, first of all, there are tiers to PDA.
Yes.
So the way that I kind of try to do it is like, okay, there's certain things that should be done in like intimate, confined spaces, just out of respect for yourself as well as the people around you. But if it's really displays of affection, right, where it's just so, it's like, I feel like we need more of that in the world, if only just for inspiration, right? Just to be like, oh, whoa, I should give my friend a really tight squeezed hug. Because you see that, for example. Or like you go back home to your partner and you're like, okay, I'm going to give them a really deep, gentle kiss, for example, And just having exposure to that, I think is a beautiful thing. But distinction, again.
Absolutely.
Like what is the energy in the room,
I think we get into extremism where it's like if a hug is the equivalent of making it out in the subway, and it's like, that's not the same thing. It's not. And we can't think about it like the same thing because then we're like, okay, don't touch me, don't talk to me, don't look at me. It's like, okay, that's not healthy. For sure. Right? That's not good for you. It's not good for the people around you. It's not a good energy to kind of carry with yourself. And it's I see, especially among guys, where it's like, don't hug me because that's weird and people are going to think weird things. It's like, it's not weird.
It is such a gendered thing, right?
It's not a weird thing to hug your friends. Hug your friends, guys, please.
Hug. We need more of that.
We really do. We really do. It's I don't know. I'm a hugger. I love hugs. I'm just being honest. I do. I've always been. My family can speak to it. They all hate it because I hug too much. And
really?
Yes. I really am.
Iman, don't ever let go of that part of yourself. It's a beautiful thing.
It's an interesting thing, and it's I don't plan to, but it's an interesting thing because I think the opposite extreme is people who are so anti-touch and don't hug me, and not that that's unfair, and not that that's not okay to feel that way. But I think that sometimes what's lost is how powerful a hug can be. Right? To just feel comfort and safety and that sort of feeling of warmth.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, of being in connection with someone just for a moment. Right. I think we lose that because we're so worried about what people are going to think of us, what public perception is, what oh my God, PDA, gross, nasty, leave me alone. Aspects of it, yes, please don't do that here. But other aspects of it, I think that we forget that that's different, right? And the distinction that you're drawing, I think, is so huge.
And I often think about, I think the world would be a healthier and more caring space if people had cuddles more, like there's something so different, right? Like being able to fall asleep next to someone and being held is just really that not only just the physical experience, but that safety and that comfort is so healing. I really truly think it's a form of therapy in many ways. But how many people living our fast-paced life and then,
I mean, welcome to hookup culture, right?
Yeah, exactly, that too, right? And so I think that is one of the most precious things that a human can have access to, just that really not sexually charged, but just that human desire of like, let's hold each other and keep each other warm. I think it's like the most beautiful thing.
It really is. It really is. And we forget that, I think we forget that. And I think it's natural. I think if you see animals like sleep together at night because, to be warm, and it's a necessity. It's a physical necessity outside, right, to survive. And we as human beings are programmed the same way, right? If we were all living outside in the wild in New England, we would have to be warm. We'd have to figure it out. And that's one of the things, the way to stay warm is to share body heat, right?
Totally.
And so it's coded into us to need that physically.
Totally.
And so our brains experience it in a certain way of, this is a positive thing because, I mean, historically we needed it to live.
Yeah.
Right? And yes, we don't need it to live anymore, but our brains still need it because our brains are built the same way, or at least very similar to the way that they were when we needed it to live. Absolutely. I just want to ask, and I'm just very curious as to what comes to mind when I ask this question. What is a belief that you have about mental well-being that has stayed with you, that is important to you, that you think is super crucial, that maybe isn't talked about? And I'm just so curious as to what is the first thing that you think of?
The first thing that comes to mind is holistic. So I feel very grateful to have grown up in a community that really focused on the holistic dimensions of health, that it's not so siloed and delineated, like mental health is mental health, emotional health is emotional health, physical, they're all intertwined. So what's so interesting about, let's say, take the example of medicine, right? So Western medicine is like you have a cardiologist, you have you have all these different separated kind of faculties and disciplines. In more traditional, let's say, whether it be Chinese traditional medicine or Korean traditional medicine, the saying goes, if you have a headache, look at your toe, because everything's so interconnected, right? So one of my guiding North Stars when it comes to how I think about mental health is that we can't just see it as psychotherapy, that okay, let's get to their consciousness and layers. Yes, that's one dimension of it, but how does it connect to your gut health? What are you eating? Because seriously, what you eat puts you in a groggy state or doesn't affect your sleep. And depending on that, maybe if you don't get good sleep, you're sleep deprived, which really makes you so emotionally vulnerable and sensitive. If I have only 5 hours of sleep versus 8 or 7, I know that things affect me more. That comment from my colleague will just rub me the wrong way, or one little mistake I make will feel so out of proportions.
Right.
So all of that to say, I think just kind of making always that clear distinction of okay, mental health, we need to have this type of therapy and this type of medication or whatever support. And then physical health, it's all connected. So I think the more we see it like that, the more I think you think about, again, I think about designing your life. How have you designed your life to really nourish these different dimensions of your body and well-being? And so I feel really grateful to come from an Eastern background. And Eastern philosophy is so holistic, right? They always think about how are all these things interconnected?
Absolutely.
And I think the more we think about mental health in that way versus its own thing and dimension, the more I think we can really set up also, especially young people, for success, right?
Right. I think we've made health such a business that it's more profitable to have 700 doctors that you have to go to treat all the things that are going on. Versus someone who has an understanding of the body as a whole. Right. It's been such a journey for me, my own physical health, problems when it comes to my oral health, tongue ties and all that sort of thing, where it was people would look at very specific areas and not connect them to other things. And I met a guy by the name of Matt Pigeon. Matt Pigeon connected the fact that I had a tongue tie to the fact that my feet are flat because the fascia in my body was tight and stretched in a certain way, and your fascia connects from that deep front line, connects from your tongue down into the arches of your feet. And so when there's tension up here, it creates tension in different parts of your body, in your legs, in your chest, and into your feet. And so when I had a tongue tie release, it disrupted the way that the fascia tissue was holding in my feet. And the arches that I have in my feet have in many ways collapsed. And so that's something I had to work on rebuilding. And that I didn't have, the muscles don't have the strength because I didn't have the capability to hold an arch before. It's such an interesting thing. And that took me years to find that, right? To find someone who was able to connect those things. And I didn't even have to tell him. He looked at me and connected. He was like, "You have flat feet?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Yeah, look, it's because you had a tongue tie." And I was like, "That's crazy. No one has ever told me this."
I know.
And it's so insane.
It's so, okay, so I had an equivalent for me was, I was in India and I got a really bad ear infection, one that I've not experienced before. And I think if I went to an ENT here in the US, they'll be, just take some antibiotics, da-da-da. But I went to an Indian doctor because I was in India at the time, and they're like, stick out your tongue, let's look at your throat. They're like, okay, your acid reflux is really causing this. So they connected it to my gut versus just looking at inside your ear, you know? And another experience I had was I'm a very big fan of Korean traditional medicine. I feel really grateful to have access to that and a deep admiration and respect for this school of medicine. And I was in middle of my startup, super intense. Anyone who's gone through a startup ecosystem just realizes it really, a crash and burn is sometimes inevitable. And so I went to my Korean traditional doctor, and what they usually do is like, assess the energy. And whether you believe it or not, materialists will be like, oh, that's like woo-woo and whatever.
Yes.
But either way, this is my experience, right?
Sure.
So then they assess the energy, and then we sit down, we just have a conversation, but like more like not like psychotherapy, okay, here's a Kleenex tissue box type of conversation, but more so just like, oh, what's going on in your life?
Yeah.
Very casual, down to earth. And then he said, Danbi, there are certain blockages in your system, in your energy. It's like, and he described what I was experiencing, that it's like, Danbi, you have a certain vision, but you feel like it's not going the direction you want, and you're constantly like compromising that, and that's really having an impact. And I felt so understood. Like I would have never come up with that on my own. And like a person that has not had like 20 sessions with me where I'm like crying in front of them and like having the Kleenex tissue box experience was able to break down something that I was experiencing that I could not even name. So I don't know what the science behind that is, but I felt so understood. And even though he didn't prescribe me all the different types of tablets or pills to make me better, I just, even having that knowledge really just kind of shed light on like, oh, whoa, I need to change this in my life because it's causing so much anxiety and like emotional and mental distress that it's really affecting my physical body. And it has nothing to do with the physical assessment of my condition, right? It's kind of like the aftermath. It's like all these psychosomatic symptoms, but just having a practitioner who can holistically look at you, your energy, your mannerisms, the way you're sitting, maybe certain physical symptoms. I mean, that's amazing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so I just, again, getting back to the original question of like, how do I think of mental health? Like just holistic. If we could look at that and really, to your point, just like you wouldn't have come to that knowledge of your soul, like that, the condition,
absolutely.
the flat feet. But imagine where as part of our educational systems, we have people helping young people, like just fostering that intuition in themselves to see the holistic map of their parts and their body, right?
Right.
I think that is honestly one of the best skills to have, that intuition.
Right. It's interesting because every doctor that I went to that told me how to tongue tie and talked about fascia and the deep front line knew that the deep front line connected your tongue to your feet. They just didn't think about looking at the feet. It was like, you know what I mean? It's not that people don't know that there's connection because the science says, there's a fascia connects in this way and whatever. But they didn't even think of looking at it, right? It was just that it was that such a narrow viewpoint of like, I'm only looking at your mouth, right? I'm only looking at your tongue. I don't care about the rest of it. It connects here, but I don't care. I'm looking at your tongue only. That's not, but you're telling me that it connects, right? I know that it connects. You know that it connects. Why wouldn't you look at everything else? Because we know that it's connected. I think it's super interesting. The other thing that you mentioned in terms of emotional, mental resilience, I think super interesting. That idea of like healthy body, healthy mind, right?
Yeah.
Where when you sleep well, you feel better, you think better, your brain works better, you can take an insult better, like, you know what I mean?
No, but seriously.
But seriously, it's such a fascinating thing, and it's and someone goes both ways. I think when we have a healthy body, we can have a healthy mind, and when we have a healthy mind, we can have a healthy body.
Yeah.
And I think that is always an interesting thing because it almost speaks to this idea that like you don't have to. There's not like a specific way to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not so specific, right? Healthy body is healthy mind, and healthy mind is healthy body. If you want to go work on your mind, go work on your mind. It's going to help your body.
For sure.
If you want to go work on your body, go work on your body. It's going to help your mind. So when people say like going to the gym is super great for you and it creates endorphins and all that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like when you go work out because it's healthy.
Yeah.
Right. Your body likes it and your brain likes it, and so you feel better.
For sure. I think what's so interesting, though, based on just kind of the communities I've been a part of and people in my life, it can go also extreme. So, for example, there are people who are so focused on their physical health. So they have the perfect diet, perfect regime, perfect set of like exercise routine, but they completely neglect this, the mental and emotional dimensions, right?
Yep.
So it's not to say that if you have a perfectly physical body, it completely, it's like you have to that's the holistic nature.
Absolutely.
Just making sure your priorities are distributed, not necessarily in an even way. It depends on what you're going through.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe you need to focus more on your emotional health because of maybe you went through a really bad breakup, for example, right? Yeah. So if you're just like hyper focusing, I'm going to punch in my hours, do my CrossFit today, maybe that then becomes a form of escapism,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So
True.
I think
Very true.
that's the hardest part. Even something that I really struggle with, right? Where how do I make sure that it becomes this balancing act where I am investing in my physical body, but also making sure that I'm not neglecting emotional things that are just going to come out in a really nasty way, and also making sure my mental, like I'm not pushing my mind too much because I work a lot, and like my intellectual stimulation it's preventing me from sleeping well. So I think when I put it that way, I totally understand that this is a more complex path forward versus focusing on one dimension. Let's treat your physical condition. Let's make sure you have mental health support.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do we do that without making that overwhelming?
Right.
Without, being like, you have to get it right.
Right.
And I still struggle with that. I'm like I think my brother is much more like, really, I look up to my brother a lot in terms of how he's always prioritized his well-being. And he, I think, takes a very holistic approach. Like he's exercised pretty much every day of his life, but without being like, I have to be an Olympian, right?
Yes.
But also make sure that whatever emotional struggles he's going through, he has the right support.
Yeah.
And also mentally, he's like, okay, like, am I pushing myself too much? And he has that down in a way that I don't think I do, right? So my point is, it's like no wonder that people have more insular ways of approaching health, including mental health, because it feels more doable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus, okay, holistic is like, oh my God, it's so complex. I'm not going to try to even, take this challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll break down. Like, I think if you focus so much on the physical, right, and you neglect the mental, your body will start to break down.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, I'm doing all the physical things right, but it doesn't work.
Totally.
Right? Physically, you'll break down. Same thing goes the other way, right? If you're doing all the mental stuff, but you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not taking care of your body, you start to break down.
Yeah.
Your brain will start to lose function, as we talked about. Like, you won't be as good mentally.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, what's going on? I do all the stuff that I need to do when I do my mental training every day or whatever it is. But it's like, you can't do just the one, right? You have to do the both. And it is complicated sometimes. And I think as in society, we have to talk about it more. And I think that talking about it gives people the comfort to be like, okay, I actually have a deficiency, I suppose, in this area. It's like a vitamin deficiency, right? It's like, I'm low on vitamin D. Okay, so go take the vitamin D supplements. People are like, no, why?
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're so right. And I just wonder also like how it's also like knowledge, access to knowledge and just a certain know-how is so important. But this is like, I always find myself feeling so privileged to even be entertaining these thoughts and have these perspectives. Because depending on what type of household you grew up in, what type of access to culture or knowledge, you have a specific understanding of the world and your well-being. So, and then also the term holistic, by the way, is like so considered like kumbaya and woo-woo that like a lot of people who are much more materialist and very much like science explains all, anything that's not explicable using science is like no-go. So you see, so I think that's one thing that I feel really lucky to have grown up with, like a deep admiration and orientation towards holistic.
Yeah.
But then I don't really talk about it, depending on what circles at Harvard, right? Where I'm like, okay, if I say holistic, are they going to think that I'm this kumbaya hippie? Which maybe I am. But then why does it have to be like discounted? You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's such a odd thing that we take a word that doesn't mean anything crazy. Like it, you know what I mean? It just means like well-rounded, essentially, right?
Yeah.
It means comprehensive. It's not it doesn't mean demon circles and magic and shamans
or crystals.
Crystals are right. It's not that's not inherent in the word.
Yeah.
But it becomes implied. Right?
Totally.
And then it's like, okay, how else can I talk about this? Well, I take a well-rounded approach to medicine. I take a comprehensive approach to my healing. It's like, okay, you're just saying the same thing in different words.
Yeah.
Because it sounds better, right? And it's such a weird thing that we do with language, where we give words meanings that they don't have.
Exactly.
Because we associate them with things.
Totally.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the word boring.
Boring?
Boring.
Okay.
What do you think of when you think of the word boring?
Oh, I think lack of stimulation. So you're in, so maybe you're alone, lack of stimulation, things that like excite you or like evoke certain reaction or thoughts in you is like the way that I understand boring. But I honestly think that being in a state of boredom is so important. Beck, again, the colleague that I work with, her research involves like attention restoration. So like how do we actually create spaces and environments where people's attention is being restored versus depleted? And I think a big part of that is also being bored.
Yeah.
right? Because if you have a deep discomfort with boredom, you're constantly looking for things to do and to think about, and
Right.
that's not restorative.
Right.
It's not to say that you shouldn't have stimulation, but that shouldn't be every second of every day.
Right.
So it's so normal, and that's why we need to sleep. Otherwise,
Yes.
if we didn't sleep, if we didn't have that time where our mind is off and we're just, in a state of complete restoration, we will not survive.
Yes.
And so the question is sleep going to be the only time where we have restoration? No, ideally you also have that as your awake hours,
Yes.
So as much as I struggle with boredom, I think it's also almost like a superpower to navigate and embrace boredom,
Right.
because you need to rest. Your mind needs to rest, your body needs to rest. And also sometimes being in a bored state allows for really big epiphanies and inspiration, where it's almost like you're clearing your plate.
Yes.
Right? That allows something new to come versus constantly being in this like cluttered state of like, okay, this is everything on my mind.
Right.
So yeah, boredom, I think super important, very underrated.
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes back to the idea of slowness that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like being bored is slowing down,
Yeah.
right? It's not the most exciting thing. It's
Yeah.
not supposed to be, right? It's slow, and it fascinates me. Like you see people watching movies, and it's like I'm bored. It's like, how?
Yeah.
Right? You're watching a movie with your friends or your family. There's a story going on, right? It might not be a good movie, right? But there's something happening. You're with people,
Yeah.
and you're like, you know what? I'm bored. I'm gonna go on my phone, and I just don't understand it.